I've noticed something that feels a little paradoxical. A lot of people believe that if your income is low, saving money is almost impossible. They assume the issue is purely the number. If you earn less, there's nothing left to put aside. On the surface, that sounds logical. But after years of observing financial behavior across very different income levels, I've seen something more interesting. It's not true that people who earn less always struggle with money. And it's not true that people who earn more always have extra. What really makes the difference isn't the income number first. It's how the brain reacts when it feels scarcity. When money feels tight, the brain doesn't operate the same way. It shifts into survival mode. Decisions become short-term. Pressure gets magnified. And as pressure rises, people start looking for relief, not optimization. Most people don't realize that many financial mistakes don't come from ignorance. They come from exhaustion. Exhaustion from constantly calculating. Exhaustion from weighing every small purchase. Exhaustion from feeling behind. And when we're exhausted, we don't look for smarter ways to save. We look for ways to feel better. This video isn't about cutting your life down to the bare minimum. I don't believe in living miserably just to prove discipline. I want to talk about a different approach, one that helps you save on a low income without fighting yourself every single day. Main idea. 1. When money is low, emotions run high. I've noticed that when your bank balance gets thinner, your emotions get thicker. An unexpected bill isn't just a number, it carries anxiety. Eating out isn't just $15, it comes with guilt. Buying something small for yourself isn't just a purchase, it turns into an internal debate. What's interesting is that the less money we have, the more we think about money. But thinking about it more doesn't mean we control it better. Many people live in a quiet state of tension. They're not bankrupt. They pay their bills. But internally, they feel fragile. And that fragility makes financial decisions more emotional. Here's a very normal example. After a long, exhausting week, you know you should cook at home, but you're drained. And in that moment, your brain isn't asking, "Should I save money?" It's asking, "Don't I deserve a little comfort?" Most people don't realize the second question is far more powerful. The issue isn't that one meal. The issue is that when money is tight, every decision carries pressure. And when pressure builds up, people look for relief. If you don't understand this, you'll assume you lack discipline. But in reality, you lack a system that reduces pressure. Sustainable saving doesn't start with numbers. It starts with calming your emotional state. When emotions settle, decisions become clearer. And when decisions become clearer, money starts staying longer. Main idea 2. Don't try to change everything at once. I've seen a pattern repeat over and over. Whenever someone decides to fix their finances, they go extreme. They cut all discretionary spending. They eliminate anything that feels unnecessary. They promise to track every dollar. For a few days, it feels powerful. It feels like control, like taking your life back. But here's the interesting part. Over-control creates a new kind of pressure. Most people don't realize the brain resists changing too many habits at once. When you cut too much, too fast, you push yourself into a constant state of deprivation. And that deprivation isn't just financial, it's emotional. It feels like less freedom, less comfort, fewer choices. After a week or two, fatigue shows up, not because you're weak, but because the system you built requires too much willpower. And willpower is limited. I've noticed that the people who save the longest aren't the ones who cut the hardest. They're the ones who change the slowest. They pick one adjustment. Maybe they reduce eating out from 4 times a week to 2. Maybe they set up a very small automatic transfer into savings. A small change doesn't feel like punishment. It doesn't trigger resistance. It's light enough to maintain. Most people don't fail because they're not smart enough to manage money. They fail because they try to become a completely different person in a single weekend. Money doesn't need a perfectly disciplined version of you. It needs a stable version of you. And stability only comes when you slow the rate of change down to something your brain can accept. Main idea 3. The feeling of not enough makes you spend more than you realize. I've noticed something subtle. When someone believes they don't have enough money, they start behaving as if every opportunity is rare. And when something feels rare, the brain wants to grab it immediately. Most people don't realize that feeling financially scarce doesn't just affect your bank account. It affects how you evaluate opportunities. A very common example: you see a sale. Normally, you might think it through. But if you already feel like you don't have much, that discount suddenly feels more urgent. Your brain whispers, "If I don't buy it now, I'll miss out. Later might be harder." What's interesting is that many poor spending decisions don't happen when we have money. They happen when we're afraid opportunities won't come again. I've observed people with modest incomes who remain calm. They don't react strongly to promotions. They're not pulled by crowds. They don't rush. Not because they're rich, but because they're not living in mental scarcity. Scarcity makes everything feel urgent. And when everything feels urgent, we act faster than necessary. Sustainable saving isn't just about controlling spending. It's about reducing the feeling of scarcity in your mind. When you trust that you have a plan, when you clearly see where your money goes, when you have even a small buffer, that feeling of not enough starts to soften. And when it softens, you're no longer compelled to grab everything right now. Most people think they spend because they want to, but often they spend because they're afraid of missing out. And that fear is usually stronger than the actual need. Main idea. 4. The problem isn't how much you spend, it's how many decisions you have to make. I've noticed something most people overlook. Financial fatigue doesn't just come from not having enough money. It comes from having to make too many money-related decisions every single day. What should I eat for breakfast? What about lunch? Should I buy this? Should I renew that subscription? Should I downgrade to a cheaper plan? Every small decision drains mental energy, and when your energy drops, the quality of your decisions drops with it. Most people think saving money is about discipline, but in reality, it's about structure. If you have to fight with money every day, sooner or later, you're going to lose a battle. I've seen people with modest incomes who manage their finances calmly and cleanly, not because they're better at math, but because they reduced how often they have to think about money. They have clear, fixed expenses. They rotate familiar meals during the week. They limit where they shop. They automate what can be automated. What's interesting is that when you reduce the number of decisions, you also reduce the number of mistakes. Saving money doesn't always mean spend less. Sometimes it simply means decide less. When you design your life so money follows a stable path, you don't need constant willpower. And when you don't rely on constant willpower, you don't burn out. Money becomes part of the structure of your life instead of a daily fight. Main idea 5. Low income isn't as dangerous as unclear cash flow. I've noticed something worth thinking about. Two people can earn the exact same amount and live in completely different emotional states. One is constantly anxious. The other is calm. The difference isn't the number they earn. It's how clearly they understand where their money is going. Most people don't realize that what stresses them out isn't low income. It's uncertainty. When you're not sure how much will be left at the end of the month. When you don't know how much you've already spent this week. When you're unclear about what's coming up next. Your brain automatically assumes the worst, and when your brain assumes the worst, it triggers anxiety. Anxiety pushes you to extremes. Some people clamp down and refuse to spend anything. Others feel overwhelmed and just give up. Spending carelessly, neither approach is sustainable. I've seen many people change their situation by doing something very simple, writing out a clear picture of their cash flow. Not a complicated spreadsheet, just a clear list. How much is coming in? What are the fixed expenses? Roughly how much is flexible? The moment the picture becomes clear, anxiety drops significantly, not because they earn more, but because they understand where they stand. What's interesting is that clarity itself saves money. When you see the full picture, you act less impulsively, you're less driven by emotion, and you start making decisions based on reality instead of fear. Low income can be challenging, but unclear cash flow is what truly makes things dangerous. Main idea 6. Don't use money as a reward just because you've been through enough. I've noticed a repeating pattern among people with limited income. They don't spend because they're bad at math. They spend at very specific moments, after a stressful week, after being disrespected, after feeling like they've tried hard but haven't seen results. In those moments, money becomes a reward, a way of telling yourself, I deserve this. Most people don't realize how powerful and risky that phrase becomes when paired with a debit card. It's not that you don't deserve something good. It's that you're using money to solve an emotional need. The issue isn't one coffee, one dinner, or one small purchase. The issue is when self-reward becomes your default coping strategy. I've seen people who only reward themselves a few times a month. Each time isn't huge, but together, those moments erase what could have become a small financial cushion. What's interesting is that watching your savings grow, even slowly, is also a reward, but it's a long-term reward. And the brain usually prefers short-term ones. So instead of banning yourself from ever spending for comfort, I suggest noticing something else. When are you most likely to spend? After a tense meeting, after an argument, when you're exhausted, when you identify your vulnerable moments, you can prepare for them. Instead of shopping, maybe you build a different ritual. Go for a walk, listen to music, call someone you trust, actually rest. Money isn't the only way to feel cared for, but if you don't build other options, it will always be the fastest one. And the fastest option is rarely the most sustainable. Main idea 7. You don't need to earn more immediately. You need a safety buffer first. I've noticed something interesting. When income is low, people often think the only solution is to earn more as quickly as possible. That sounds logical, but what I've observed is this. When someone is financially stressed and tries to increase income immediately, they often make rushed decisions. Taking on extra work without considering health, investing without fully understanding, jumping into trending opportunities out of fear of missing out. Most people don't realize that when you're unstable, every expansion decision carries more risk. Before thinking about growth, you need a buffer. It doesn't have to be large, just enough so you don't panic over a small, unexpected expense. A small but clear cushion. A safe zone that keeps you from collapsing at the first disruption. What's interesting is that once you have that buffer, your relationship with money shifts. You're less rushed, less fearful, less drawn to quick promises. And when pressure eases, you start thinking longer term. I've seen people with modest incomes but a small cushion. They make slower decisions, more confident ones. They're less reactive. On the other hand, people without that buffer, even if they earn a little more, still feel fragile because there's no foundation. Higher income without a stable base still feels unstable. Money truly changes your life when it creates distance between you and panic, not when it simply makes you feel rich. Main idea 8. Don't build a budget around your ideal self. I've noticed a very common mistake. When people create a financial plan, they design it for a better version of themselves. Someone who never impulse buys. Someone who always cooks at home. Someone who's always motivated. It sounds good on paper, but that's not who you are in real life. Most people don't realize budgets fail not because the numbers are wrong, but because they were built for someone who doesn't exist. A simple example. You tell yourself that starting next month, you won't eat out at all, but in reality, your job has late nights, or you have kids, or you're exhausted on weekends. If your plan ignores your actual life, it will break. And when it breaks, you don't just lose money, you lose trust in yourself. I've noticed that the people who manage money best don't build perfect plans. They build realistic ones. They leave room for imperfection, room for fatigue, room for bad days. They don't ask, what's the most optimized life I could live? They ask, what life am I actually living? When your budget reflects your real behavior, you don't have to fight it. And when you're not fighting your own system, you can maintain it longer. Money doesn't need a beautiful plan on paper. It needs a system that survives real life. Main idea. 9. Don't measure progress by the amount. Measure it by your level of calm. I've noticed something subtle. Many people believe they'll only be okay once their account hits a certain number, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. But what's interesting is that reaching that number doesn't automatically create peace. Because if your mindset hasn't changed, anxiety will follow you to any income level. Most people don't realize that when income is limited, the most important metric isn't how much you have, it's how calm you feel when you look at your account. Are you sleeping better? Are you less startled by unexpected expenses? Can you pause before reacting? If the answer is slowly becoming yes, you're making progress. I've met people who haven't saved much yet, but they're no longer living in panic. They understand their cash flow. They know where they stand. They don't attack themselves after a difficult month. That calmness is the foundation. On the other hand, some people earn more but still feel constantly uneasy because they never built a sense of control. More money with a chaotic mind still feels like scarcity. Less money with a stable mind creates a base to build on. Real progress isn't about moving fast. It's about being less afraid than you were last month. And when fear decreases, you stop making decisions from a defensive place. Main idea 10. Financial success begins when you stop blaming yourself. I've noticed something deep that rarely gets said. Many people don't struggle because they lack money. They struggle because they see themselves as bad with money. Every time they overspend, they say, "I have no discipline." Every time they can't save that month, they think, "Maybe I'm just not cut out for this." Most people don't realize self-blame doesn't create change. It creates avoidance. When you feel ashamed about money, you avoid looking at it. You delay checking your account. You don't want to sit down and review your numbers. You let things drift. And the more they drift, the more control you lose. I've observed people who turned their financial situation around, not because they suddenly earned more, but because they changed how they talk to themselves. They began treating mistakes as data, not verdicts. Instead of asking, "Why am I so bad at this?" they asked, "What led me to make that decision?" The second question creates insight. Insight creates adjustment. And small adjustments repeated consistently create big change. When you stop blaming yourself, you become calm enough to observe your behavior. And when you can observe it, you can redesign it. Money doesn't respond well to panic. It responds to clarity and stability. If you're living on a tight budget, that doesn't mean you've lost. I've realized what matters most isn't where you start. It's whether you're gradually reducing the pressure in your own mind. When pressure drops, decisions improve. When decisions improve, money stays longer. And when money stays longer, you begin building a foundation. Don't try to change everything in 1 week. Pick one idea from this video, stabilize it, then keep it long enough for it to become part of who you are. If this resonates with you, hit like so I know this topic matters to you. And subscribe to the channel so we can keep talking about money psychology in a calm and practical way every week.